Welcome everybody to Year In Sizecoding Part 2. We're going through the rest of the month of 2022 and highlighting all of the best sizecoding entries from 8 bytes to 512 bytes that happened throughout the year of 2022. I'm your host PS. Hope you enjoyed the selection that we put together for you, and let's get right into it and show the best of releases from 2022. Kicking things off, we had Levy 42 bytes released in August 2022 by Helmut. Then we had Lovebyte Turbo happening, a demo party happening inside a demo party at ABBUC, which was really fun to put together. I want to highlight specifically the Timelapse production that was released there, put together by Dave84, but all of the different community participated in this and doing different versions. It was like an open source version of trying to optimize the specific effect, and it became a really interesting video to see the different versions of the effect. Then we had Silly Venture happening in Poland, an Atari demo party that always has some sizecoding competitions. We have a couple intros that we wanted to highlight. The first one was Venturo by Marquee Design. They got first place on the Atari ST intro competition for 128 bytes. And then the 256 byte intro competition was won by Chryzantemy by Jakub Husak. For the Atari XL XE. Both of them really cool intros, so please do check them out. Then Undefined party happened in St. Petersburg, Russia. Relatively small party to compensate that Chaos Constructions wasn't happening this year because of the political turmoil happening. Couple intros being released there. One of them was this one, Undefined by Marquee Design, got first place in the Undefined Tiny intro competition. Was a double release for both Pico 8 and the TIC 80. Moving on to the Jumalauta 22 years combined intro demo competition in Finland. We have 7 tips for saving money on electricity by Jumalauta, made for the TIC 80 with a very interesting sound connection with the visuals. Then Xenium happening in Poland also had a couple of competitions dedicated to sizecoding. The first one that we had to highlight was the MS-DOS 256 byte intro competition. It was won by Dawnbreaker by Marquee Design for the MS-DOS, as we mentioned. They also had an Atari XL 256 byte intro competition, which was won by Put Things Into Perspective by Gorg of Agenda. And then they also had a ZX Spectrum competition, which also had very interesting releases. Our favorite was actually the second place entry, Nightswimming by Joker. Moving on to Hungary. Function Demo Party typically also has a 256 byte intro competition happening every year. Was one of the highlights of the 256 byte category for many years. They had a total of 12 entries, very good competition, and in first place we got Veritas by Helmut, having this special tunnel with sound, really good entry. Moving on to Germany, Nordlicht happened there. They had a 512 byte intro competition, was won by a Commodore 64 entry, Help Poltergeist by 4Agent. So really cool entry, definitely check it out. Outside of any competition, we had a special version of Mossery XE XL for the ABBUC magazine that was released. And also Elements by Jetset Entertainment was also released for the Micro W8, also worth checking out. In South America, we had a Flash Party happening as always. They had a 256 byte intro competition again this year, and a couple intros we wanted to highlight. Floppy, cyberciruja Odyssey by Ale Perez for the Magnavox Odyssey 2, which is not very common platform to see releases for, especially sizecoding stuff. And then in first place we had Superhighway by Marquee Design, doing a TIC 80 Mode Z version of their highways trick that they previously had done. Nice release as well. Moving on to back to Germany, we had Deadline demo party happening with a 256-byte intro competition. Second place was Vox Populi by Marquee Design, and in first place Paradox 64 bytes by Helmut, really doing some raycasting in 64 bytes, which you don't have much space to do that. Moving on to other entries, we had a cafe demo party happening in Kazan, Russia, with a couple of competitions of size coding entries. The first one that we wanted to highlight was Brave New World for the low-end 256-byte intro competition. Was made by Marquee Design for the Atari. Then they also had the Fantasy Console competition for size coding stuff. In second place we get the Gyza by Marquee Design. Special feature because the code is shared between Pico 8, TIC80 and Micro W8. All three of them in 128 bytes. So very interesting release here. And in first place we had Holes 256 bytes by D-Art, which also featured the very interesting Micro W8 release. Then we had a high-end 256-byte intro competition, which was won by Gene X with Peacock, this fractal plasma thing for the MS-DOS. They also had a couple of releases for specific old-school computers. The ZX Spectrum in particular had a very interesting 256-byte intro competition. It was won by Spin of Gauguin, very interesting release. And then for the BK001001, we had CSI World 256 bytes by Kuvo, who got first place. Also very cool, worth checking out. Then we move on to Inercia demo party in Portugal, which also had a couple of different size coding dedicated competitions. The first one that we wanted to highlight was the 128-byte intro competition, which was won by Microlair of Marquee Design for the Micro W8. Then we also had a dedicated Fantasy Console 512-byte intro competition. A lot of good entries here. The first one that I wanted to highlight got third place, ABBUC by Zep, made for the Pico 8, probably the best Pico 8 512-byte intros that you can see to this day. Second place, Reflecting Kubo Balls by Shy for the TIC80. And then in first place, Stroboscope by Pestis of Brainless Coders. Very intense multi-scene intro that really was very interesting to see. Then in Poland, we had the winter edition of Silly Venture. They always have some size coding entries there, mostly dedicated to the Atari. We had a very good entry for the Atari Falcon called Menger Marcher FC. That got first place on the 256-byte intro competition of the Atari Falcon. And then for the Atari XL XE Village by PSU of Trix won that one. This was also in December, and a couple of other things that we wanted to highlight that happened in December. VCC, the Vintage Computing Christmas Challenge, organized by Logiker, had an insane amount of entries, a lot of size coding stuff happening there. Very worth checking out the video and the results and the different entries for the different platforms. If you enjoy code golfing and size coding in different platforms. Then we had the Tiny Code Christmas organized by Lovebyte, which also had a video showcasing the different stuff. Particularly interesting if you were learning to do size coding in fantasy consoles, stepping stone to getting into size coding overall, also worth checking out. And then a shout out as well to Field of X, who's been organizing the Monday night byte jam sessions that they put together different people programming for the TIC80. With a lot of size coding involved as well. It's been very interesting to check out every single Monday. Also worth mentioning the Pico 1K Jam organized by Liquid Dream during September 2022. Total of 83 entries released, a lot of small games and things, but also some demo scene related content in here. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed this selection of size coding entries that we had, going through all of the year highlights. Hope you found some hidden gems. Hope you remembered a few entries that you might have forgotten. See you next time. Hope you enjoy the rest of Lovebyte. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.